Let me read to you a passage from the 23rd chapter of St. Matthew's Gospel, verses 1 to 12. It's the Gospel for Saturday after the 20th Sunday in Ordinary Time. St. Matthew writes, "Then Jesus said to the crowds and to his disciples, 'The teachers of the law and the Pharisees sit in Moses' seat. So you must obey them and do everything they tell you. But do not do what they do, for they do not practice what they preach. They tie up heavy loads and put them on men's shoulders, but they themselves are not willing to lift a finger to move them. Everything they do is done for men to see. They make their phylacteries wide and the tassels on their garments long. They love the place of honour at banquets and the most important seats in the synagogues. They love to be greeted in the marketplaces and to have men call them Rabbi. But you are not to be called Rabbi, for you have only one master, and you are all brothers. And do not call anyone on earth your father, for you have only one Father, and he is in heaven. Nor are you to be called teacher, for you have one teacher, the Christ. The greatest among you will be your servant. For whoever exalts himself will be humbled, and whoever humbles himself will be exalted." That's from Matthew chapter 23, verse 1 to 12. It speaks of the path, the true path to glory. You know, among the most precious passages of the Old Testament are those which describe theophanies. They present God's appearances, and with them come revelations not only of his very existence, but of his character and likeness. We learn from them what the Creator and Lord of all is like. For example, the prophet Isaiah, we read, "Saw the Lord sitting upon a throne, high and lifted up, and his train filled the temple. Above him stood the seraphim, and one called to another and said, 'Holy, holy, holy is the Lord of hosts. The whole earth is full of his glory.'" Isaiah chapter 6, verse 1 to 3. God appears as a God of transcendent glory. Again, there is the dramatic and detailed account at the beginning of the book of the prophet Ezekiel, describing his first vision of God in the land of the Chaldeans by the river Chebar. In the 13th year, the heavens were opened, and I saw visions of God. Chapter 1, verse 1. The spectacle is then described and concludes, "Such was the appearance of the likeness of the glory of the Lord." Chapter 1, verse 28. The reference to the glory of the Lord perceived in this first vision is repeated in the description of the prophet's later visions, as in chapter 43. We read, "And behold, the glory of the glory of the God of Israel came from the east, and the earth shone with his glory. And the vision I saw was like the vision which I had seen earlier. As the glory of the Lord entered the temple by the gate facing the east, the Spirit lifted me up and brought me into the inner court. And behold, the glory of the Lord filled the temple." Chapter 43, verse 1 to 5. God's transcendent splendour is emphasized, a splendour to be acknowledged by his people. But now, in the fullness of time, a greater marvel about the God of glory was revealed. It was that this God of the heights and of glory is humble. He readily takes, indeed he yearns to take, the lowly position. The Son had, as St. Paul puts it, the form or state or condition of God. But he did not cling to his equality with God, but divested himself of that glory and became as men are, and lowlier still, even to death on a cross. God of glory, who had revealed himself in the theophanies described in various passages of the Old Testament, humbled himself. Our Lord, the incarnate Son of God, described himself as meek and humble of heart. "Come to me and learn of me," he said, "for such is my heart." And he told his disciples that he who sees me sees the Father. Christ readily went unacknowledged and chose to lack the worldly trappings of honour and glory, ending his life in an ignominious death. St. Paul tells us that because he did this, God the Father raised him on high and gave to him the glory that had been his from all eternity. This, then, is the background to the lesson that our Lord teaches in the Gospel passage I read earlier from Matthew chapter 23, verse 1 to 12. "The greatest among you must be your servant. Whoever exalts himself will be humbled, and whoever humbles himself will be exalted." All through history we see evidence of man seeking glory for himself. Military generals, rulers, people of all walks of life. The pharaohs of Egypt, Alexander the Great, various Roman emperors, they sought even to be acknowledged as divine. After he conquered Egypt, Alexander took time out to visit the temple of Ammon in Siwa, in present-day Libya. He went there to consult the god. Alexander sought to rival Perseus and Hercules. As he was descended, so he thought, from both. At the temple, he received the answer he desired. On the coins that Alexander minted, his face is similar to that of Hercules. It is to be remembered that Hercules was both son of Zeus and a mortal who became a god. Such were some of the delusions of the famed and accomplished young Alexander, who suddenly fell ill and died. He was proud, as the book of Maccabees states, chapter 1, verse 3. Satan's sin was to seek the glory that is due to God. And as we read in the first pages of Genesis, it was the temptation he successfully insinuated to our first parents. "You will be like God," he said to them. Genesis chapter 3, verse 5. Christ's lesson goes clean contrary to all of this. Though being divine, he did not cling to the glory that was his, but chose to humble himself even to death. Man seeks glory, but glory is attained through the lowliness and humility of Christ, the cross. Let us, through love for Jesus, make this our chosen preference in life. If honours come our way, then let us strive to be detached from them and attached to the humble Christ. We must work at freeing ourselves from self-exaltation. For as our Lord teaches us in the Gospel I read, whoever exalts himself will be humbled, and the man who humbles himself will be exalted. Matthew chapter 23, verse 1 to 12. St. Ignatius Loyola, in his famous spiritual exercises, invites us to contemplate two great standards. They are the standard of Satan and the standard of Christ. The one involves the choice of honours and riches. The other involves the choice of Christ, with humility of heart and poverty of spirit. Let us every day choose Christ and his standard. God has shown that it is the path to glory.